Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new season of the Purposeful Life Show with your host, Adrian Starks. I'm excited to share some new updates of the show with you, starting with a new look, sound, and energy, as well as a variety of guests coming aboard with intriguing topics of conversation. I hope you enjoy the new level of energy that will be brought to the show. Thank you for all of your support since the very beginning in 2019. Wow, it's been 3 years already? Because of you, the Purposeful Life Show is now in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, and we aim to get it into the top 1%. Continue listening to the show and share it with others. You can also now listen to the show on my Facebook page at Adrian Starks, where you can comment in real time and communicate with me about your aha moments. Thank you again for all of your support, and let's make this one hell of a year and be purposeful about doing that. Wishing you all much love and success. Are you feeling boxed in at home from too much information coming to you all at once from the media and news? Has any of this information allowed you to improve your current situation or be able to adjust to it without further stresses? You may feel like you are running out of options and your hopes are downward. There is a way to take back your attention and to allow yourself to go much further in options and to feel free again. Join me as I show you how to think outside of the box. Welcome to the Purposeful Life Show on the Champion Up Podcast with Adrian Starks. If you're looking for the ideas that could be your breakthrough for change in your business, career, or personal life, this podcast is just for you. Join Adrian as he speaks on topics of self-development and interviews a variety of entrepreneurs, business owners, and thought leaders to reveal their ideas and solutions to success and its challenges. Subscribe to the show and leave a review. It's time to champion up and be a courageous creator of change. Welcome back, my champions, my courageous creators of change, to another episode on the Purposeful Life Show with your host. I am Adrian Starks, and thank you for listening. Today, we are going to start thinking outside of the box. We are in an era of being boxed in with too much stressful information. It's everywhere, and the majority of the information we are taking in from the news and social media is negative and puts us continuously into a state of fear. As we await help from the government and for the restrictions to be lifted, we can't help but be pulled to resources of information that are only further validating our fears. We feel trapped. We feel isolated, and we feel scared. We are feeling boxed in. Stresses are rising, and many of us are finding it harder to cope with them. But there is a way to take back our attention and place it more on important matters. In the words of the modern-day philosopher and teacher and brilliant speaker, Jim Rohn, we must stand guard at the door of our minds. We must stand guard at the door of our minds. If it's any time to do this, ladies and gentlemen, it would be today. The doors of our mind are open to all types of information at all times, but we can choose how we filter it. The reason this is important is because we are always using information to validate what we currently know and to navigate through what we do not know. It is here where our thinking becomes critical, and it is impacted by our ability to think openly and with flexibility. I want to take you back to 2018 when I traveled with a small group of friends and business owners to Florence, Italy. I had always dreamed of going on this kind of trip, and I finally mustered up the courage to get my butt there. Talk about sparking your mind for higher levels of creativity. I could see why this place was considered to be the heart of the Renaissance. The streets were flowing with beautiful architecture and well-carved sculptures that screamed for attention to every finite detail. This is where I began writing my book that I will be releasing a little later this year. Be on the lookout for that. But there were so many highlights and powerful experiences upon this 8-day excursion, but two stood out to me. One was coming face to face with David's Michelangelo. I'll talk about that on another episode. Very powerful. The other experience was coming face to face with the founder of Music World Entertainment and the father of Beyonce and Solange, Mr. Matthew Knowles. One of the coordinators of our group, a good friend of mine, Michelle Falcone, I believe I interviewed her on one of my previous segments called Loneliness. You should go check that out because I think it's definitely relevant to these times. She arranged for Mr. Knowles to come and speak to our group about creating our own masterpieces. The night before meeting Mr. Knowles was very interesting. You see, we were all out and about the streets of Florence, Italy after a wonderful night of dinner. And by the way, the food there was so addictive and I ate so much. But Michelle gets a message that evening from Mr. Knowles indicating that we would need to find an empty box. I can't actually remember the size, but I do recall her telling us that we needed a very large box. So we're thinking in our heads, what the hell do we need with an empty box? No one knew. So the next day arrives and we see Mr. Knowles in person. With his 6'4" frame, he looked at you through the frame of his glasses, beaming directly into your heart and soul with a sense of empathy and awareness. You could feel him noticing you. It was an interesting feeling, and I could see why he is so successful in communicating with people in business. The workshop was intimate as we learned the traits of successful achievers. But throughout, I'm still thinking about this damn box in my mind. But no one wanted to ask. It was just sitting there on the floor next to him. Then that moment came, and he smiled and asked if we were wondering what it was for. We quickly nodded, and he said, "This is one of the traits of success I'm going to talk to you about." And I'm thinking, wait, a box? Then he said, "Have you heard of the term thinking outside of the box?" And that's the pace he used because he's very articulate. And of course we've heard the phrase thinking outside the box. But he said, "Have you ever acted out the process of what it is?" So one by one, we had to get into this box and move around. Then he said, "Keep walking around and you'll find yourself hitting the corners as you try to go further. Now, step outside of the box and think about walking around." So to us, it was much different, obviously. It blew my mind because you can only go so many places and so far in that box before you're bumping up against the corners. And he called these corners your doubts, your fears, or other people's opinions. Very powerful. As he ends the exercise, he looks at us again through the eyes of empathy and passion and determination. And he leaves us with this phrase: "When you step outside of the box, you are able to take yourself further than the people who keep themselves boxed in." So the point here is that when we think outside the box of everyday thinking or what the majority is thinking or doing, we can create new pathways for ourselves that help us to have more options. It is these new options and experiences that allow us to draw upon our own information to make different decisions toward the problems that keep many people boxed in. And the boxing in comes from the boxes of the televisions, the computers, and even our phones. I believe that when we can educate ourselves and decide what we want to go into our minds, remember that quote from Mr. Jim Rohn, "Stand guard at the door of your mind." I mentioned this earlier. If we can listen to that quote and understand it, we can take back our personal power that can fuel our determination, our self-esteem, and our ability to be creative toward those problems. We are able to think outside of the boxes of limited thinking. What has been your box of limited thinking lately? Is it coming from the news, social media, negative conversations? We must step outside of the box and think more openly about ourselves and this world. When we do this, this causes our stresses and frustrations to decrease and frees us up for new innovative ways of dealing with our surroundings and circumstances. This is how a man from Alabama, Mr. Knowles, could change the world of music and business. He did not remain in the box of limited thinking, and he had a lot of odds against him. So how can we begin to expand our way of thinking? One is looking at different resources. Books. You may not have the love for books as I do, but you can condition yourself to read a little each day and develop a discipline for it. Many people will tell me that, well, I don't have time to read, or I haven't read a book in years, or I never finish a book. And that's a behavior. We can always learn new behaviors. When we begin to read constructive material, whether it comes from books or different resources, and I'll give you some options later, this gives our minds something else to focus upon instead of just problems. Some of my favorite books that I refer to often are A Better Way of Living by Og Mandino, Anthem by Ian Rand, Originals by Adam Grant, Drive by Daniel Pink, and The Keys to Fulfillment by Eleanor Roosevelt. I have many more, but these are some of the resources that keep my mind from being boxed in by the fears and uncertainties of the world and the media that's coming through to us on a daily basis. I want to help you do the same and to get you out of the box of limited thinking. The first step is read something inspiring each morning for 15 minutes. The reason why I say the morning time is because the morning is when you are the most open and receptive to new ideas. You've been sleeping overnight. Your brain has consolidated memories from the previous day. It's fresh. It has free space and it's ready to download whatever you take in first. Most people download negative information in the morning, and this is where they get in trouble. And then they have their whole day set upon that information, and that's how they see the world. So we want to reverse that. So let's make sure that this information you're taking in for the first 15 minutes of reading, it puts you into a more positive, creative, I can do mood. Take your time reading and let your thoughts sink in. Don't just read for 15 minutes to say you're done. If you read a page for 15 minutes, a paragraph for 15 minutes, I want you to just read and let that information touch you. This is the point of life change. This is the point of how we change how we feel, think, talk, and act out here in the world, regardless of what circumstances are showing to us currently. If you're feeling challenged or frustrated or even inspired by a phrase, write it down and think about it. Think about it throughout the day in conversation. Think about it when you're driving. Think about it when you're alone. This helps us to build new information, a new story for ourselves. And so when someone reveals to us a negative story, we have this new story and data to go back and say, that's not what I think and it's not what I feel. And it's certainly not what I believe to be true for me. I mentioned earlier about you may not love books the way that I do. So you can choose a book, an audiobook, an ebook, a blog, a magazine. I prefer Time magazines. I love those. Choose either one of those as a starting point, whatever is going to get you to start reading for 15 minutes each day. And the key here is to make sure it is not agreeing with the box of thinking negative about the world. It should stretch your mind and allow you to think constructively about your situations. The second step, take what you have learned and try to apply it throughout the day. Ponder over it. I believe I mentioned this earlier. This is your way of keeping yourself outside of the box of thinking from the people and media who are not doing the same. The third option here is if you're having a hard time finding the book, the magazine, the ebook, or the blog to start with, go ahead and start with my ebook called Finding Your Inner Champion. I'll post a link in the notes section of this episode. It's free for download, and it's a great way to keep you outside of the box of thinking because it will take courage to do that. Remember that books and constructive information broaden our horizons and allow us to see much further than those who see only the troubles in front of them. You can choose to program yourself for greater amounts of success, or you can be programmed to sit and wait for failure to tap you on the shoulder. We can manage ourselves or be managed by someone else. You have the power to choose what comes into your mind by keeping your mind from being boxed in with a limited way of thinking. Step outside the box. You have resources all around you, and it's up to you to choose the right ones for your change and growth champion. Until then, I encourage you to be that courageous creator of change in your life. This is the Purposeful Life Show on the Champion Up Podcast with myself, Adrian Starks, and thank you for listening. Subscribe to the show and connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube at Champion Up with Adrian Starks. Go to championuppodcast.com to be inspired by more life-changing content. Until then, I encourage you to be that courageous creator of change in your life.